Hello, are you online able to hear us?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, I am going to call the November 2025 meeting, the Manitou Springs Planning Commission to order. First item of business, I'll call the roll. Commissioner Graybill. Here. Commissioner Latimer,
Present.
Commissioner Wilson,
Present.
Commissioner Rosenthal,
Present.
Commissioner Harper,
Present.
Commissioner Casey.
Present.
Okay, and tonight, we don't have any quasi judicial items on the table, so I think all the alternates, if, Frank and if Megan's here too, you're all ready can participate in the deliberation, and for the voting purposes this time, it'll be Keith, since we only have one alternate needed. So with that, let's see. Next item of business is approval of the minutes of the October meeting.
I'll motion to approve the October 8th meeting minutes.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor, say aye. And I think Gloria's abstaining since she was not at the whole meeting, and I guess Mike also wasn't there. Fortunately, he stayed home. So, okay, so that passes 5-0 with 2 abstentions. And we'll move on. Next will be public comment on non-agenda items, and this would be a time if anybody in the audience would like to make a comment on something that's not on our agenda. This would be the time to do it. You have up to 3 minutes. And so I don't see anyone in the audience. I don't see any hands raised in Zoom. So we'll move on. Next item is public comment. Is unfinished business, new business, effective meeting board training, the clerk's office.
Hello, Commissioners. Thank you for having me back. I am Deputy City Clerk Kristen Ducoy, and I also have our Court Clerk Danielle Owens here with me today to help assist. Just a moment while I get the screen share up. All right, so we have developed this training for all boards and commissions to review effective meetings. And with that said, we have tried to make this as engaging and interesting as possible, as we've heard that this can be a dry topic. And I do encourage you all to participate throughout. I will be looking for some participation and to interject if you have any questions as well. I'll be going through some motions with you and asking you questions as we go along. So my first question to you all, and I think there's more than one answer to this, what do you think makes a meeting effective and why is that important?
I'll say a good agenda.
All right, awesome. I heard sense of humor for the record.
Just good communication back and forth, different opinions.
All right, yep. What else?
I think it's really helpful when, it's sort of what Mike said, just when people listen, they don't just come to talk, but they come to learn and come to collaborate.
Yeah, I think those are all great points. And why do you think those are important? What does having an effective meeting accomplish for you all and for the city?
Making good decisions.
Yeah, I think so. I think it supports that. Anything else anyone can think of?
You get some work done instead of talking about a variety of topics.
Yeah, it helps you stay on track, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think those are all good points. I think kind of thinking back to our like Cora and Sunshine Law, I think also following good processes is going to help support consistency and transparency as well on top of all that, right? Yeah. Okay. Cool. So now that we kind of know why this matters, I have a presentation agenda that I would like to go through. This is pretty much everything that we're going to be running through like an agenda, but during this presentation training. And I hope with your permission that I can share this presentation for you today. So I'll start by saying it's November 12th at 5:35 p.m. and I'm calling this presentation to order. So we'll go to roll call. So of course, taking roll is essential for the record and establishing quorum. We do recommend some formality with roll call, just like you did earlier, calling everyone's names so that we can clearly hear on the record and for anybody who's listening who is present. And then, of course, it's very helpful for the record to acknowledge absent members. One recommendation that we're suggesting for all boards and commissions is to acknowledge if absent members are excused or not excused for the record. Something that we would suggest consider adding to your commission SOP, standard operating procedures. This is important to establish in the record because unexcused absences can be grounds for removal by council. And then lastly, we do recommend that the same person consistently take roll throughout. Sometimes that might be delegated to a secretary or to staff to assist so that the chair can focus on other things. But that is up to you guys how you want to process that. And then we'll go on to section C, approval of agenda. This is a section that we recommend on all agendas. It's just a formal process to allow you to address any potential changes to an agenda at the beginning of the meeting. So the board may approve the agenda as amended or as presented, and in doing so, they're agreeing to follow the agenda from top to bottom or in the approved amended order. So it's just an opportunity at the beginning of the meeting to determine if you need to remove items from an agenda or reorder items if something's come up between publication and the actual meeting time. We do recommend avoiding adding items to the agenda to comply with open meetings law, especially if it's a matter that the commission intends to vote on. And any questions about approval of agenda and how that works? Or anything so far? Oh, okay, cool. So with that said, I am going to be looking, like I said, for some participation, and we are going to be doing a little bit of role play exercise as we go along. I do want to suggest a change to this presentation agenda as you see it right now. For the presentation agenda, I would like to move item E1, motion commotion, after approval of agenda. But before we do that, I'd like to suggest that the commission make a motion for this exercise to make all motions during this training invalid and for training purposes only. And for the purposes of this exercise, I am going to have Danielle participate, and I'm going to have all of your alternates present participate. So these are invalid motions. They're just for practice. Does anybody want to try to make a motion to make the motions invalid during the training?
I move to make all motions invalid during this training.
All right, thank you, Gloria. Okay, and may I ask, how does your board usually votes, verbally, visually, or both?
We do both.
You do both?
We don't use the controls on that.
Yeah. Let's see here. Have you ever done a roll call vote, or anybody know what that is?
Yeah, we haven't needed to.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. So that's something that I was gonna have us practice today. It's ultimately up to the board how you want to do that. But it's just another tool for you to use, a learning opportunity for anybody who hasn't done it before. Yeah. Let's see here. Then, does anybody want to second the motion to make motions invalid?
Yeah, I'll second the motion.
Great, thank you, Chair Delwich. All right. There it is. All right, and I'm gonna practice a roll call vote here, so I'll call you each by name and then you'll tell me how you vote on this motion to make motions invalid during training. Commissioners Casey,
I vote to approve.
all right, and Graybill,
Approve.
Latimer,
Approve.
Owens,
Approve.
Rosenthal,
Approve.
Day,
Approve.
Delay. All right, and Harper? All right, Vice Chair Wilson
Approve.
and Chair Delwich.
Approve.
All right, motion carries unanimously. Thank you all for participating. And then would anybody like to motion to reorder our agenda to put item E1 motion commotion after approval of agenda?
I move that we move,
E1 motion commotion?
yeah, E1 motion. Sorry, I
That's
didn't
okay.
memorize it. I move to move the agenda as you specified.
Great, thank you, Chair Dulwich. And who would like to second that motion? Anyone?
I second the motion.
Great. Any further discussion? Anybody? Okay. All right, going to do a roll call vote here again. Commissioners Casey,
I approve.
Graybill,
Approve.
Latimer,
Approve.
Owens,
Approve.
Rosenthal,
Approve.
Day,
Approve.
Delay, Harper,
Approve.
Vice Chair Wilson,
Approve.
and Chair Delwich.
Do not approve.
All right, great. Let me see here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 voting and 9 plus. Okay. Motion carries 9-1 with Chair Delwich opposed. All right. Then, okay. I appreciate you guys playing along with me. It really helps keep my slides in order. So we moved on to E1 motion commotion. And this is just an exercise, like I said, with a bit of role play that we have incorporated it into the training slides here. To get us comfortable with practicing motions, discussion, and voting, hopefully with a little bit of fun thrown in. The general process is that I will call an item for the presentation and open up discussion. A commissioner can make a motion and another can second. And then we'll see if there's any further discussion before voting. And then the role of the clerk, or oftentimes your chair, will announce the outcome. So that's the process that we'll be following for this exercise. I will note that Robert's Rules is a little bit more formal than this, which is something that's referenced in our code. But for the purposes of today, we're going to be following this general process. And then Danielle just passed out those motion commotion cheat sheets, and they were also included in your packet. This is a cheat sheet that we have created based on motions that are listed in our city code, and they are from Robert's Rules. Most of them you probably won't ever use, but we wanted you to have that as a reference point should you need it. Most of the time, you're probably going to use a main motion, which is going to be I move to approve, or maybe a motion to recommend to council. There are a few postpone motions on there as well that you might use from time to time. And there is a motion to amend, which under the formal Roberts Rules process, you can only amend a main motion twice. So that one can get a little bit more complex, which I can get into if anybody wants to hear about it. But there are also friendly amendments. Have you all ever used a friendly amendment before?
We have.
Yeah, okay, so you're familiar with those. All right then, and I think that covers the game. Does anybody have any questions about motion commotion?
Do you have a recommendation on a motion to call the question?
On a motion to call, like
Yeah,
the verbiage that you would use?
Well, no,
Or-
when it's appropriate.
When it's
I mean,
appropriate?
Can I call the question simply because I think I've heard enough? To put
I-
it simply.
I would say that you probably could, because ultimately when you call the question, it requires a 2/3 vote of the full commission to end that discussion.
And a
So,
second also.
Yes, you're right. It does require a second. So you would be making a motion, it's a motion, call the question, to end closed debate and move on to vote. So then you would all vote to decide if you want to end that discussion. If 2/3 agrees, then you immediately end the discussion and move on to the vote of the main motion that's on the floor. So does that make sense? Okay, awesome. Any other questions right now? No? Okay. Great. Then we will move on to item D1, roles and responsibilities, and I'm just going to go through these briefly here for you all. As I'm sure you're aware, your chair runs your board meetings and may oversee assigned tasks as needed. And then, of course, agendas are a huge part of what they do as well with staff. In the absence of the chair, the vice chair is responsible to fulfill all those duties. Your secretary, who might be on the board or staff in this case, is responsible for minutes. Regular members are expected to attend all meetings unless excused, participate in discussion, and vote on motions. Alternate members are not required to attend meetings but may participate in quasi-judicial discussions, which I believe I heard you mention earlier, so I think we're aware. And then they may only vote when filling in for an absent member. We are recommending for all boards and commissions that you establish a process and the standard operating procedure to select alternates as is required by code. We'll look at that a little bit more in detail later as well. But of course, it's important to acknowledge for the record who is seated and not, whether for the whole meeting or a particular item. And then staff liaisons assist you with your remote technologies, provide reports, and answer questions, general questions regarding rules of order. Your council liaisons may provide procedural direction and relay the city council's position, but they're not required to attend meetings. Any questions about all these roles so far? No? Okay. All right, and then I have a motion commotion here for you. Very broadly, normally your agendas are more specific than this, but very broadly under the roles and responsibilities heading, I would like to ask, should the commission adopt a mascot? Does anybody have any discussion points on that or suggestions?
Could you repeat that? Could you maybe get the mic a little closer and repeat? I didn't quite understand what you said.
Yeah, the last question or anything else that,
What you just said.
so I was saying that very broadly under the roles and responsibilities agenda item that we have here, I'm posing the question, should the commission adopt a mascot? And I was making a comment that most of the time, you're going to have a more specific agenda item for what's actually being discussed than what I am doing here in this case for training purposes. Yeah. Any thoughts?
I personally wouldn't support adopting a mascot. I think it would unnecessarily divert public funds to a frivolous expense and perhaps detract from our quasi judicial function here.
All right, thank you. And I believe I forgot that we have candy for your participation. Danielle, would you pass around the candy? Maybe we just go, I know we've had a few participants already. So thank you all. So we have a suggestion not to adopt a mascot. Anybody else have anything to add?
I second that emotion, that emotion.
All right, and that was a motion then? Do you want to make that a motion?
Sure, I'll make it a motion.
Okay, and we have a second. Is there any further discussion?
I have to raise the fact that this was not an item approved on the agenda, and so per public meetings rules, we are likely unable to discuss it.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Day. All right. With that said, does anybody want to try to, I know probably your chair usually announces the outcome of your votes, but if anybody wants to try, take a stab at that after I call the vote here, does anybody want to try to announce the outcome? No? Okay. All right. Just looking for participation, trying to keep you guys on your toes. Okay. With that said, I'll go ahead and do a roll call vote. Commissioners Casey,
I vote yes to deny.
all right. Graybill,
Yes to deny.
Latimer,
Yes to deny.
Owens,
Yes to deny.
Rosenthal,
Yes to deny.
Day,
Yes to deny.
Delay. All right, yes to deny. Harper,
Yes to deny.
Vice Chair Wilson,
Yes to deny.
and Chair Delwich.
No
All right.
to approve.
Okay. Thank you. All right. And then we have motion carries 9-1 with Chair Delwich opposing. All right. With that said, I will move on to understanding quorum and voting requirements. Does anybody remember from our training before? I'm going to do a little bit of quizzing here. What the definition of a quorum is? Delay says a majority of those present. That's correct, yes. And then there's a little more to it than that too.
50% plus one.
That's accurate as well. Yeah. So the other piece to it is the minimum number of members that must be present at board meetings to make the proceedings of that meeting valid. So for example, if you get to your meeting and you don't have quorum, then you don't have a valid meeting. And under Robert's rules, you're actually supposed to announce that there's a lack of quorum and adjourn right away. It is true that a quorum is a majority. So it's that majority that you need to make the meeting valid. Okay, and then a little bit of math here for you all. If you want to chime in or put up fingers, how many members do you need present? If you have 7 appointed members, how many do you need for a quorum? 4. Yep, I've got 4 from a few of you. Thank you. And what if you have 5 appointed members? What was that again? 3. Thank you. And what if you only have 3 commissioners appointed? 2. Thank you. All right. And then as far as voting, per Manitou Springs Municipal Code, the motions are defined to require either majority or 2/3 vote of those present. So if you, that's defined by the motions as well in your motion cheat sheet in front of you. So again, it's of those present. So for example, if you only have 5 out of your 7 appointed regular members present, out of those 5 members, how many do you need to vote in favor of something to get it approved? Did I hear 3? Yeah. All right. Great. And what if it was 6? What's the majority with 6? 4? That's correct. Any questions about that? All right. We'll go on to item D3, code requirements. Your Manitou Springs Municipal Code can be found on the city's website. Can I get thumbs up for anybody who's been able to look at that before? The code on the website, I got a thumbs up, couple nods. All right, thank you. So in our code, we do have some general requirements pertaining to boards and commissions as a whole. So to go through a few of those, all boards and commissions shall consist of 7 voting members and up to 3 alternates. And planning commission is completely full right now, which almost never happens, so that's exciting. During the first board meeting of each calendar year, the board shall elect a chair, vice chair, and secretary. Per Manitou Springs Municipal Code, each board and commission shall provide the opportunity for public comment. It's not any more specific than that, so we do recommend following suit, just like council, and offering that on regular agendas. And then it says each board shall establish and maintain its own written standard operating procedures. And then actually, just adjust this a minute. So I'm actually going to go to the city website so that we can take a quick look at the code. We will go to. So for anybody who hasn't been able to look before, it's under the government tab on our website is municipal code. And it takes you to this homepage where it's going to list any ordinances that haven't yet been codified into the system. You have your charter in here, where those matters can only be changed by election. And then under Title II is where you're going to find boards and commissions. So the general boards and commissions section is here, 2.09. And if we go to 209080, I'd like to point out the SOP section that we just referenced. So it does have some more specific requirements, and the clerk's office has requested from all of our boards and commissions that we adopt a official SOP by the end of the year, and then file that with the clerk's office. And the specifics in here, minimum requirements by code, are going to be that the SOP shall include information on open meeting requirements, process for selecting which alternate will vote in the event of absence of a regular member and more than one alternate is present, and training for members as well would be mentioned in there. So that's just something that we are just reminding everybody of. And then I will also share, you probably might already be aware of this, but you do have a specific section for each board and commission in here. The planning commission is 2.20. If you ever want to read your powers and duties, they are under this section here. Does anybody have any questions about the website? No? Okay. All right, so going to turning discussion into action. I'll start by saying that the commission acts as a whole. It can only act through formal collective decisions. Individual commissioners can't speak or act for the commission unless the board has formally voted on something. So why does voting matter? Motions are how the board moves from discussion to action. They document the board's official position or decision. They help staff, council, and the public understand what the board officially decided. And without a motion, it could be questioned if there's any clarity on whether the board supported, rejected, or even considered an action. So with that said, and summarized at the beginning of this slide, is generally when to make a motion. We would recommend maybe making motions if you're making a recommendation to council, of course. This could include member appointments or reappointments. That would be a way that maybe you could more affirmatively recommend to council those appointments. If you are authorizing an action or initiative on behalf of the commission that goes beyond discussion or fact finding, such as adopting or amending an SOP. If you wanted to make a statement as a commission supporting or opposing a position, and any approval of funds or resources. Furthermore, when making a motion, I like to think of making it complete, actionable, and without ambiguity. And to do that, I'll think of who, what, when, where, why. Now, not all the time will all of those questions apply, but it's a good exercise to run through to make sure that your motions are more specific so that it is clear. And of course, there are times where motions aren't needed, such as if you're just doing more research and gathering information. If you needed to take a short break during a meeting, you don't have to motion for that. And if you are making a request to schedule a future agenda item, you generally do not need to make a motion for that either. Of course, there can be times where there are too many motions and it can create a more ineffective meeting. It could cause confusion or add unnecessary work. So a good rule of thumb is to use motions to clarify, decide, and act. Does anybody have any questions about this? Oh. All right, great. Then on the matter of turning discussion into action, I do have some kind of silly questions for you guys. I'd like you to test your instincts with some scenarios. As I pose these questions, I want you to think, do we need a vote for this? And more importantly, why or why not? Then if appropriate, we can walk through the process of emotion commotion for practice. All right, so I'm going to put it up on the screen here so that you can see it. My question to you is, should the board adopt a new tradition requiring sunglasses for all members during public comment to encourage neutrality? So does anybody think that this would require a vote? So I'm asking you to look beyond the silliness of the question, but
So are you asking if this requires a motion?
yes,
I would think not.
you think not. Okay.
I'll second that.
All right, we think not. All right, yeah. For the record, Commissioner DeLay said that it highlighted that it says tradition and question if the code would allow us to do that, right? Okay, yeah, good. Does anybody, what if it said adopt a policy? What would you think then?
I'll say yes on that one.
Okay. All right, yeah. So I did intend this to be an example of a matter that you might consider for motion. Of course, you don't have to motion on anything, but with the word adopt, you're right to question the word tradition, though. That doesn't seem quite very formal for you all, but this was just an example for y'all. Any questions about this part? No? Does anybody want to practice making a motion for fun? No? Okay. All right. One more question for you under this item. Should the board move the next meeting to the Pretzel Shop conference room for snacks and fresh air? Would this subject matter need a motion? We think it might, Commissioner Dilly?
Got a normal schedule, might have changed the locations so that the public or whoever know that you.
Okay. All right. Anybody else have any thoughts?
I question whether the board has the authority to move to a different venue. Some of that, I think, is established by our code or our, somewhere it talks, meetings take place in a specific location.
They do, yeah. What I will say on this is it is an example that you don't need a motion. Because if you're gonna change your meeting location for a one-time meeting, I would say that you wouldn't need to motion that. In fact, location is noticed on your agenda appropriately depending on where it's scheduled and the plan for that. We have considered before if someone was to permanently change their regular meeting locations, that maybe we would make a motion on that to make it more official and have the whole commission agree. But yeah, generally it is noticed on the agenda, and that is probably the most important part. So, any questions? No? Okay. All right. So we'll go back to our regular slides here. And we have some do's and don'ts. On the matter of clear discussion, we do recommend that you try to be efficient and concise in your communications and always support transparency and avoid skipping important context. This is not something we want you to stress too much, but something to keep in the back of your mind that ideally what you're discussing during a meeting, anyone should be able to jump into that meeting from start to finish and generally be able to follow what's being discussed, even if you have to reference a previous meeting or discussion. And then, so moved is something that you may have heard used as a motion before. Has the commission ever used so moved as a motion? Anybody? Yeah, I see a couple. Okay, so moved is generally let's see here. It's a common way of saying you agree with or support a specific proposal or motion. You might often see it used as a motion. We recommend keeping this for approving the agenda or minutes or matters that are more routine. And if you don't understand what someone is moving on and they're using so moved or any other kind of motion for that matter, you can ask for a point of clarification, or point of information is what it's called under Robert's rules. And it's used to ask a question to better understand the topic being discussed. It is directed to the chair, and there's no vote required for a point of clarification. And then ultimately the chair decides if it's answered right away or later. And lastly, just to reiterate, so moved, we do recommend avoiding using that for anything complex. And then approving minutes, we do recommend that you ensure minutes are clear and detailed enough to be understood by anyone. Review minutes carefully before approving, even if you weren't present at the meeting. If you come across clerical errors, which are like typos, misspellings, or dates that are obviously incorrect due to a clerical error, you can reach out to the secretary or staff in this case directly to have that corrected. It's not something that requires a motion or has to be discussed at the meeting. But if you have corrections about context, tone, or substantive content, you do want to save that for the meeting and address it when discussing the minutes. Lastly, Robert's rules actually does not require attendance at the meeting to approve minutes. So for example, if you weren't present at last month's meeting and the minutes are being presented to you today, so long as you've gotten a chance to review those minutes, you can participate in the approval of those minutes. You don't have to if you're not comfortable with doing that. You can abstain. Ultimately, the approval of minutes is a confirmation by the body that the written record accurately reflects what occurred, like a collective judgment, not individual firsthand recollection. Does anybody have any questions?
No, just a comment. This is not consistent with what I've observed city council do for about the last 20 years.
Yeah, so they do, I think they usually recuse from minutes when they were absent. And we did, share this Robert's rules with them, recently, and they were not comfortable with approving minutes for a meeting that they weren't present for, which is, up to the individual. We're just informing you all that under Robert's rules, you can participate. So you can, so long as, of course, you want to review the minutes, but yeah, council, typically follows recusing from when they were absent. Yeah. Correct. Alrighty. All right, I'm gonna jump to item E4, Toolkit for Success. These two items are more pertaining to your chair and staff and development of the agenda item or agenda. And I just wanted you to know what they are. So you'll see even on City Council's agenda that they have a consent calendar. I don't know if this will ever come across for planning commission, but it is a bundle of items that are voted on without discussion as a package. And it allows the board to differentiate between routine matters that don't need discussion and more complex issues. So that could be like if you had a batch of minutes that didn't need discussion, or say you started approving reports and there wasn't much discussion, then that could be something that goes on a consent calendar. And then board correspondence is a section that we're recommending on all of our board and commission agendas. For you, it would be commission correspondence. If you've seen council's agendas, they have council correspondence. It is a agenda section that allows you to raise issues or future agenda meeting ideas. It's only for quick mentions, and it's not really meant to bring up larger discussion. Any questions about those? No? Okay. All right. And then I don't know if, I think I might have forgotten to send my email about that. Did staff notify the commission about the board portal by chance? That's okay. I forgot to remind you all. So we have signed you all up for the Civic Clerk Board Portal, which is under the Civic Plus larger platform. If you've used anything like Civic Plus Alerts or C-Click Fix, this is just a digital tool that you could use to prepare for meetings should you want to use it. And I will be sending a follow-up email after the meeting, so I will get the link to you. And I'll also be doing a short demonstration here too. So we'll go ahead and take a look at what the board portal looks like. So mine has everything in it, but for planning commission, you'll just have everything for CPC in here. And it's a place where you can access agendas, minutes, and you can also input notes. I will note that when I did this presentation with HBC last week, the city attorney's office mentioned that these may be subject to core requests. So any notes that you put in here would be good to prepare for points that you might want to bring up at a meeting. But of course, keep it appropriate and keep in mind that maybe that would be requestable later. With that said, we don't use the media on here. All of our media is on YouTube and Zoom, as you know. So what it looks like, you'll just click on, we have today's agenda, for example. You can play around in here, and I'll send you a demonstration video later for the annotation feature. So you can view files and you can annotate. You have the agenda, the packet, and you can annotate individual attachments as well. What I will say is if you start annotating the packet and then you go to view or into the annotation file of an attachment, it does not cross over. So however you use that feature, if you choose to, you want to be consistent in how you use it. In your packet, we did include a cheat sheet for the notes feature, which is what we probably would recommend is easiest. You can come into any agenda item and write down whatever you want to remember. It automatically saves. And then when you go to the notes section, you can see that every meeting I've made notes on shows up here. And if I click on this, it's going to show me a sidebar of the item that I noted. So it's just a tool for you to be able to use to prepare for meetings. And I can even click over back to the agenda item from there as well. Any questions about this?
Kristen, can anyone get a login for the portal?
It's only for boards and commission members, but I have you all signed up. I think most of you were already in our system through probably another Civic Plus platform item. And what Civic Plus does is it gives you all the same credentials for those different platforms. So you probably already have login for it. If you can't figure out what it is, you can reach out to the clerk's office anytime for assistance with this or resetting your password. We can do that for you. Yeah. Anyone else?
Kristen, I don't think this has really come up with many CPC applications, but I know there's sometimes applications that require confidential information be shared, like with the board only. At least that's like an option whenever we're uploading.
Yeah.
And that's where if this was ever necessary for whatever legal purpose, because I think I don't have one off the top of my head.
Yeah.
This is how they would access them. Because I think in the past we've had to like print out all of those documents and then have them be picked up or signed up
Yes.
for. And so this streamlines that process in the event that there was something confidential being shared, which I don't think has come up with CPC in the last 3 years that I've been here, but
Yeah.
that this is where that would also happen. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. It does streamline that process because you can, through this system, you can publish your agenda for the public and the packet for the public, and then you can publish the full packet for the board that has confidential materials in it that they can only access through login. The notes that you put in here are only visible to you when you log in. I'll clarify that as well. Yeah. All right. Any other questions? Okay, we'll jump back to our presentation. We're almost done here. All right, we have ethical expectations. As an advisory board member, you are a steward of public trust. So of course, you want to act in the public's best interests, be fair and respectful, maintain transparency, and avoid using your position for personal gain. I think pretty straightforward there. And then recusals. You must recuse yourself if a conflict of interest arises. I think we have maybe discussed a bit of what this was before, but if anybody has any questions, I can address that as well. Generally, when you recuse yourself, you want to state your intention to recuse on the record clearly and briefly. Step away from the discussion table or leave the room during the item. And do not participate in discussion, vote, or attempt to influence others in any way. So with that said, if you think that you can't be impartial, or if the public perception is that you can't be, you might want to consider recusing yourself. All right. And then adjourn. May I ask, how does the commission usually adjourn?
When we're finished with all items and there's no more, we adjourn. We don't do a formal vote.
Okay, all right. So I would call that adjournment my chair, which is absolutely acceptable. I think that's probably the most efficient way that I see our boards and commissions usually do it. It's easier for you. Our only recommendation is to do it consistently. However, whatever practice you use, be consistent with that. All right. We've reached the end here. Does anybody have any questions? No? Okay. Presentation adjourned. Thank you for having me.
Okay, thank you.
And then, oh yeah, we're gonna collect the handouts and then I'll pass out some more candy too.
Do you want this back? No.
Oh, and one more thing, we are keeping those handouts in the battery box. If you ever want to use them, they'll be here in City Hall, Memorial Hall.
No. Great, thank you. Okay, we'll move on. The next item on new business is consideration of Title 18 code revisions for ADUs.
Okay, thank you, Chair, very much. For the record, Fred Rolandhagen, Planning Director. Let me bring up my presentation. Okay. So we are back. We are still under. We are. This is a public hearing for consideration of Title 18 code revisions. For housing occupancy limits, ADUs, minimum parking requirements, multifamily development. Planning Commission, as you recall, the Planning Commission held a public hearing and made a recommendation to City Council at your September meeting on these particular items. And in October, the City Council held their first and second readings. So first reading was on October 7th, second reading was on October 21st. During their first reading on the 7th, City Council requested to see some more limitations or asked staff to provide limitations in text format for them to consider regarding a couple of things. One of them was for them to consider was construction or ADU construction in front yards. Number two was conversion of covered parking spaces to ADUs. Number three, using or prohibiting ADUs to be used as short-term rentals. And then the other discussion item that we had was regarding ADUs on properties that currently contain multiple single-family residences. This was actually, there was some language that the Planning Commission recommended that was questioned by City Council about what it actually meant. And I think if I remember right, the language was saying that the first ADU must comply with these regulations, but any subsequent ADUs or subsequent housing must comply with the density standards that currently exist in the code. The intent of that particular of that language was to assure that the ADU code or the ADU regulations that were adopted would just apply to one ADU for each single family residence. But we didn't want that to somehow create a loophole where if somebody had multiple single family residences on one lot, that they could come in and apply for multiple ADUs for each of those residences and create exponentially more density. So that's where that number 4 comes from. And so we introduced that to City Council for their second reading. So as I said, City Council had their second reading on October 21st, and the council did approve limitations regarding short-term rentals and no ADUs on properties that contain multiple single-family residences. They had quite a bit of discussion over construction in front yard, ADU construction in front yards, and quite a bit of conversation regarding covered parking spaces and whether those should be converted to ADUs. At the end of their hearing, at the end of their meeting, they decided to remand those two items to the Planning Commission for recommendation before they made a decision. And so that's why we are here today. And that's why this is the agenda item. So on the slide that I have up right now are the four new limitations, or the four new conditions that the city council had considered, that the planning commission did consider the short-term rental one, and the planning commission decided not to make that a limitation. The city council went ahead and adopted that as a limitation, that accessory dwelling units shall not be permitted as short-term rentals. And then the last one, that an ADU shall not be located on a lot or parcel of land if that lot or parcel of land contains more than one single-family residence. But they asked for planning commission to discuss and provide a recommendation on these other two. So this is the language. What we have in front of us is the language that was presented to city council. Number E, indicating stating that ADUs shall not be located in front yards, and that the minimum setback for a detached ADU shall be the rearmost facade of the primary residence. Goes on to say the minimum front setback for an attached ADU shall be the frontmost facade of the primary residence. So what that means is, if somebody wants to construct a detached ADU, if this language were to be approved, basically the detached ADU would only be allowed in the backyard or behind the rear facade. And or if you wanted to build an attached ADU or add on to your home an ADU, it could be in the back, the rear, or the side of the primary residence, but not in the front. And then the other one that city council asked to remand, decided to remand, was the ADUs shall not result in the loss of covered parking spaces, and that this provision is intended to prohibit the conversion of garages, carports, or other similar covered parking spaces into ADUs. And so this is any covered parking spaces. So if you recall, there was quite a bit of discussion about how many garage spaces and how many garages were located in the city that could be converted or not. And so in this case, if this language were adopted, that would basically prohibit any garage spaces or any kind of covered parking to be converted to ADUs. Wanted to show, thanks very much to Aaron Ringsred in providing these diagrams. This gives you another idea of what this looks like. So eligibility, if you look at the far left one, that's perhaps a typical residence where the front the front setback is on the bottom and the rear setback is on the top. And actually, it should be noted that our historic design guidelines currently limit additions or accessory structures in the front of the primary structure. So if you're in the historic district, you would not be able to put in an accessory building in front of the residence currently. If this additional criteria, or if this additional limitation were imposed, then what you would see is on the right, where there would be allowed no ADUs as an accessory structure, a detached accessory structure anywhere in front of the rearmost facade of a building, which limits your ability to build an ADU quite a bit. what we see or what we wanted to bring the planning commission's attention to was the potential for quite a bit of limitation, and especially if you are on a corner lot like what we show here. With a corner lot, you have basically two front setbacks. And if you look at the side setbacks, that could potentially knock out quite a bit of land area where an ADU could potentially be constructed. Wanted to make the planning commission aware of that as you're discussing this. So, under potential motion language, the language at the top, in the top paragraph, is that specific language that was remanded by city council for you to consider. And then we wanted to offer a potential revision for planning commission to consider that would allow a little bit more flexibility for detached ADUs if the planning commission felt that were appropriate. That you could see that the minimum front setback for a detached ADU shall be instead the front facade plus 5 additional feet of the primary residence, or equal to the front setback for accessory structures within the zone district, whichever is greater. What this does is it would require a detached ADU to be at least 5 feet back from the front facade of the building. There might be other setbacks. There might be other setback requirements due to the zoning that would push it back more. But at any rate, the detached ADU would be at least 5 feet back from the front facade of the residence with that potential revision. So, something to think about. The second one, regarding ADUs shall not result in the loss of covered parking spaces. Staff doesn't have any specific recommendation on this, at least as of yet. But there were some questions that we wanted to throw out for the Planning Commission to consider when thinking about this, such as, is the encouragement of ADU construction or conversion more important than preserving or protecting on-site parking? We know that parking is very, very important in Manitou, and it can be is at a premium. Are there certain structures that are more acceptable to be converted than other structures? One thing that the city council had asked was, or had discussed, is the difference between a garage building versus a carport or something like that. Is one more acceptable to be converted to an ADU than another? Number 3, does it matter where the covered parking is located? Does it matter whether the covered parking or the garage is located in the front, the side, or the rear yard? Maybe being in the rear is more acceptable than the front. And then last is, if covered parking is allowed, is expansion of the structure acceptable? Would it be okay to, let's say the garage is in the front and that's allowed to be converted? It's not exactly 250 square feet, and they need to add some space for it to meet the minimum square footage for an ADU. Would something like that be allowed? So that's pretty much the end of staff's presentation at this time. Some of the motion language options would be to either recommend to city council to approve the draft language that has been presented. You could recommend to city council to approve the draft ordinance with amendments as specified or as discussed tonight. Or you could recommend that city council simply deny the draft language. Are there any questions?
And if you speak, could you have a microphone? Because this has to be on the record.
So the question that goes to the garage conversion. So let's say I just wanted to convert my garage into living space disregarding any wanting to do an ADU. Am I allowed to do that? Under, assuming assuming everything is, is in line with all the other different codes and such.
You're talking about a detached garage?
No, in an attached garage.
An attached garage. Yeah, yes, if it meets, if it meets our standards, standards of the code of the zoning, it could be converted to living space.
Okay. I guess I'll follow up, and I guess I'm not voting tonight, but I will say that it seems like if we're trying to encourage ADUs, why would we take away a garage, the ability to put a ADU in a garage, be it detached, or whatever, as long as it complies with the other requirements. And then also with the setbacks, I would say it makes sense, just from a visually aspect, it makes sense to have that front setback comparable to the front of the house, but given your diagrams, in some of those instances, you'd be very hard pressed to put a structure if the rear setbacks were as constricted as you identified there. And so your revised language, in my mind, makes sense.
Yeah, what we showed was one scenario where a residence is set back farther than the setback requires, and you see that in a number of areas, perhaps maybe more in the historic district than in other zonings. But if you look at I think if you look at the newer developments, or I guess the post World War II developments, a lot of times, I'm just saying this very generally, homes, you establish lots with setbacks, and homes would typically be built at the front setback. And so there's less likely to be room in the front yard to build an ADU due to a setback than in some of the more quirky lots, older lots.
Yeah. Are you ready for us to deliberate? Okay.
Yes.
Anyone else want to throw in thoughts? Okay, Megan.
I just had a question for Fred. I also have some thoughts, but I'll wait. You did some great analysis on the potential for ADUs, and a lot of it, I believe you found in garage conversions. Is there any statistics or findings that you could share to inform this?
I think off the top of my head right now, I don't, I could have brought some of those stats from that I provided over the summer. But what we found is, based on very generally, based on especially the topography and the presence of natural hazards in the city, it seemed like that there was more of an ability, and more of an ability for ADUs to be constructed in existing buildings, or existing garages, or existing accessory structures that were already there. It appeared like, due to those natural hazards and other development constraints, that it might be more difficult to actually build a new structure, or there's more limitation to build a new structure than there is to convert an existing structure.
Do you have more, Megan, before we move on? Yes,
No more questions. I just recall similarly, right, that if these restrictions would, it seems like significantly limit the ability to build ADUs, and then I have some thoughts if you want to move on to that, but up to you.
Okay. Gloria?
Fred, I have a question on number 2. prohibit any loss of covered parking spaces as a result of ADU construction. If, if a garage was converted to an ADU and there's still adequate parking, not in that structure, but in a driveway, was that discussed at all? It sounds like the purpose is not to lose any parking spaces.
Yeah, that, I'm trying to remember. I don't recall if that was specifically discussed, but the main discussion was the concern of losing any off-street parking. Um, So one thing that the state legislation does not allow us to do is require an additional parking space to be constructed for the ADU. If one currently exists, we could require that be used for the ADU. But unless there's some real constraints on-street parking, like no on-street parking is allowed, we could not require that a space be constructed for the ADU. And so I don't know if anybody else has any comment. I know some people had listened to the city council meeting, but my understanding was that there was just a general concern of losing parking in the city.
Well, I guess my thought would be you could still convert a garage or carport into an ADU and not lose a parking space if there's adequate space, a driveway in front of a garage or beside the garage. So am I understanding that correctly? That
Yeah, that's correct. So it's possible for a property to have more parking than what's required, and so they could convert an existing structure to an ADU and still have adequate parking on site.
But number two would prohibit that.
The way it's written, yes.
Yeah, I did watch that meeting, sadly, and, went around it lasted a lot longer than I expected it would. And I think the reason we're being asked to weigh in on this is because the council was fairly divided. They were all over the map. So I think they're just wanting to get our thoughts on it. Anyone else? I mean, I'll just spew out some of my thoughts. I tried to ask the question like, why not have ADUs in the front if they meet the setback? Or why have them? And it's just very subjective. And so I asked a few AIs like, hey, what do you think? Pros and cons. And pros are, by forcing them to be in the back of the house, you basically lose some of the space that you would have, more privacy. People often like to, have their parties or patios or pools or whatever, not right out on the street. So if you fill the back up, you lose that privacy. On the other hand, if you put them in front, then that impacts the privacy and maybe the view of the house. But, where I'm thinking is like, if we meet the setbacks, that's appropriate. I think that, the other area of concern is in the historic district, but correct me if I'm wrong, Fred, but I think the historic district code would preclude anything that would, there's the idea of not dominating the historic structure or impacting it anyway. So it seems like the design guidelines there will drive that and override anything we say here.
Yes, I believe so. Based on, I think what's in the code right now regarding accessory buildings not allowed in the front, to the front of the building already. That's already in the historic preservation code.
Yeah, so there's chapter 4 and chapter 6 of the design guidelines, which it is different than the code in terms of how it's adopted. Under chapter 4, It does discourage additions on the front facade of a historic structure, and so chapter 4 is a contributing structure. Chapter 6, which is for buildings that maybe were built, like say in 2020, and then they want an addition, and this is for attached, not necessarily detached for these, but that those are also encouraged to be like subservient to the original structure. So there, that one's where it's a little bit more subjective in terms of, is it being, you know, subservient locations for this non-contributing, but in terms of our historic contributing structures, they couldn't be in the front yard. Let me pull up chapter 10 of the guidelines so I can quote that directly for accessory structures, like the way we treat a carport, but I'll do that in a second.
So, Alan, I agree with you 100%. And I also feel the same way about not making ADUs into short-term rentals. It's already covered, you know, we only have so many we can put in town. It's not a big deal. So my question is, what are we going to tell city council? Are we going to say no? Are we going to say yes? Or are we going to say number 2 there? We want amendments.
You mean I think the short-term rentals is settled. We're not considering that. That, you know,
I was just saying, that was
Yeah.
my stance on it, but
yeah.
my point is, how are we handling?
Well, this
city
is what
council?
we have to deliberate and you know, come up with our thoughts on it. You know, if we want to recommend allowing them, you know, a different solution than what the draft language is, that's why we're here. That's why we're having this hearing, is so that we can come up with our recommendation. And in the end, council is the final decision, and they may just say, well, you know, we don't agree with those people, but, or they may say, yeah, it makes a lot of sense, and let's go with it. Because I think, I don't think, I can't even remember if it was a majority had a specific opinion. I think there were like maybe 3 different opinions on, you know, in the front, partially in the front, you know, it was all over the map. So I think that's why we're here, is to come up with our recommendation. Whether we want to just, you know, approve the language that's the draft language, or we want to come up with our recommendation of whatever. So, Aaron, you
Yeah,
want to?
so chapter 9 speaks to secondary structures within historic subdistricts, and it says things like, do not locate sheds and storage structures in front yards where they are visible from the street or public right of way. And then for the garages specifically, if you're building a garage, you would need to set that back out of view to the degree possible, and it should reflect the building style of the primary structure. So that's where there's language in there that allows us to work with topography, which is why you see those, you know, garages at the roadway that were historically appropriate. And then carports in terms of those locations, which is not going to be typical, but you would construct those to be subordinate to the primary structure. So there is some room for interpretation of those, but we take that to HPC and they review that in terms of the historic context and character and how that would impact the neighborhood.
Anybody else? Any thoughts?
Well, it seems to me that both of these proposals are adding restrictions beyond what we recommended in the first place. Isn't that correct? Both of these that they're asking us to consider
Yeah, I think so.
are additional.
Yeah. Or there are things we didn't think about or even quantify.
Well, but they are more restrictions than we had.
Yeah.
Recommended. So I think our question is, do we stick with what we recommended?
Yeah. Or is there some other middle ground?
Or-
Mike? No, I'm sorry, Roy, you know what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just going to agree completely with what Frank said. if the goal is to create more living space and ADUs, then if somebody wants to convert a garage or carport, so be it. Obviously, the homeowner will know the price they're paying if they're gonna lose that space to park. That should be their choice and not ours. And as far as the front yard, I can't imagine any situation where an ADU in the front of a house is gonna be an asset to the neighborhood. I wasn't, uh, this, the setback proposed by or discussed with city council, I thought was too restrictive. And I prefer staff's, amendment change personally.
Just to clarify, you're saying you don't think it would be good to have them in the front yard?
Not at all.
Oh.
100%.
Okay, even if you have like a 60-foot setback already and you could,
Well, I think our job too is to protect the integrity of the neighborhood. Right.
okay,
So that's why I feel that way.
okay, thanks. Anyone else? Did you have any more, Roy? Okay. Oh, Megan, I see your hand, sorry.
Yeah, thanks. So if we look at this strictly from protecting the health, safety, and welfare of our community perspective, then I think we really have to deny both of these proposed provisions here. So let's take examples in specific places in Manitou. First, we'll look at, we're not in the historic district, we're up in Crystal Hills, and there's a 1960s home where typically the garage is either flush or maybe a little setback, and they want to add an ADU to the existing building, not like a separate detached. So maybe they want to bump out their front, building like 12 feet or something and integrate that so that they can have an elderly parent move in instead of having to, force that parent to live in a assisted living place or that they might not be able to afford, or they might have a developmentally disabled adult child or a physically disabled parent or child. And so both of these provisions would prevent those kind of situations, right? As long as they meet the dimensional standards, I think that a Crystal Hills home should be able to, bump out the front just a little bit such that they still have a front yard and they meet the setbacks and they can integrate a small little apartment or, a studio into their home to have a elderly parent live with them. Like I did with my ADU. I had my mother who had advanced dementia and her spouse living right next door. And that was a wonderful way to sort of help support her health, safety, and welfare. And so that would be one example. And then if you take the garages, they're by definition at grade. And so that supports like accessibility for people who have physical disabilities. And many of the places in Manitou, especially in steeper areas, have very difficult steps to get up to, the main house. So like an at grade garage, even on Waltham, which is where I tried to think about this, right? Waltham, where you have really steep houses up and down on either side of the road, and you have very limited parking. Shouldn't we prioritize the health, safety, and welfare of the people over the parking? And if people want to make that choice to expand their home so that they can accommodate a family member or a caregiver, and they make the decision to park in the parking lot that is just below Waltham, I think that should be their choice to make, and that is the decision that supports, again, health, safety, and welfare. And to the setback piece, I was talking to my dad this weekend, and he's saying that his minister has a parish house that is well set back from the road, like hundreds of feet. And he's thinking that he would like to add some detached ADUs to support affordable housing as part of his mission and calling. And so nothing in the front yard would have prevented something like that. So just some examples to think about. And I think that there's a strong health, safety, and welfare argument against both of these provisions.
Thanks. Any other thoughts before we go to the public comment?
Well, maybe for clarity, we should say no detached ADUs in the front yard. Because right now it just says no ADU.
So the idea would be if you wanted to add on to the house in front. Yeah, and so it would give more integrity to the look of it, because you probably wouldn't make it ugly and uglify the rest of your house. Okay.
Well, thank you for your comments. I'm supportive of number one of imposing front setbacks equal to the rearmost facade of the primary resident, because I don't think for safety or just visibility, we want a lot of even attached ADUs coming out that much closer to the street. So I'm okay with number one. Number two, I think could use some reworking. I understand they don't want to eliminate parking spaces, but if you have a garage or carport in the back that could be converted, I think then, as many of you said, you figure out the parking. Either you park beside that unit, or you park in a lot, as Megan suggested. So I think the ADU construction by conversion of garages or carports, et cetera, shall not eliminate a parking space is more palatable to me.
Anything else? Okay, would anybody in the audience like to discuss this? You don't have anything to? Okay.
From what I've heard, I haven't heard anybody say they like what the city recommended. The prevalence seems to be what we originally recommended. Am I correct in that?
Oh,
I like.
yeah. I I don't think we talked about covered garages or carports at all. We didn't even delve into that. And that's to me, a new wrinkle. And my thinking is that if someone can provide parking, I'm not uncomfortable with them. Well, I don't really want it. I think it's within the realm of what the state was trying to push, was for, having these ADUs, and a lot of properties, that's the only way they'll be able to do it. But at the same time, I think, that, like the example Megan gave on Waltham, there's such a constraint of parking there. I think there is a reasonable argument to say that converting parking into housing is insanity in that realm. So I don't know how to frame that in the code, but I think, on the other hand, along El Paso, if someone has like a 25,000 square foot lot, and the house is set back, and they have a garage, and they're going to have adequate parking for 10 cars, to begrudge them the opportunity to turn their garage into a ADU doesn't make sense to me, or is overly restrictive. Do we want to just, I think we should take them one by one. There, two things. So maybe we could, someone wants to, has a notion of a motion they'd like to make on the position of detached ADUs. That would be a start.
Alan, are we looking for additional language to go with our recommendations or a motion to approve or deny these? Would you help
Either,
me with that?
we can go however we want. We can say, I think there's motion language here for somewhere in here. I lost it. Support the language that, where is it?
It's on the third page, but
Yeah,
pretty.
okay, so we recommend to approve one or both conditions as presented. And those conditions are, the ADU shall not be located in front yards. A minimum front setback for a detached ADU shall be the rearmost facade of the primary residence. The minimum front setback shall be the frontmost facade of the primary residence. That's the draft. And, we could say, we reword it however we want. They shall be allowed as long as they meet the setback, or come up with something else, like say the minimum front setback for a detached ADU shall be the frontmost setback of the frontmost facade of the house. Right now that, that's another choice that we haven't even talked about,
Mhm.
Like for Mike, would that make it less unpalatable? Because you sort of expressed thinking that it would be not right to have them in the front.
Yes, it would make it more attractive.
Yeah.
But I do think we should seriously consider either just saying prohibit detached ACUs or make a clarification between the two.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I mean, I think I would be happier just adding that word. Prohibit detached ADUs in the front, and then
Mike, isn't it already there?
no,
It's not in number one.
it says prohibit ADUs in front yards by imposing front setbacks equal to, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't clarify
For
wait.
detached.
or
ADUs.
detached. You're absolutely right. You're totally right. Sorry.
Well, go ahead, Joe.
I was just gonna maybe throw out as an option, could we just strike that third sentence and then just have it be silent on attached, and therefore attached ADUs would have to comply with setbacks? And then they wouldn't be as restricted here. It would allow those kind of bump out scenarios that Commissioner Day proposed. And then really, we're just talking about detached ADUs here and the restriction on not having them in front yards.
You said strike the last sentence.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we want to have the ability of attached ADUs, for instance, in homes that want to expand into their front yard, provided they comply with the setback requirement.
So you're suggesting that there would be ADUs in the front? Is that what you're saying?
I guess I'm open to the scenario in which you are, like Commissioner Day said, expanding your home into the front yard.
So
Compliant,
attached.
it's attached,
Mhm.
right? So, so it would not be a detached ADU in the front yard. It's an attached ADU.
I think that's a good compromise that sort of signals to council that we're moving towards their restriction, but not totally obliterating the possibility.
Commissioner Day has her hand risen.
Okay, Megan.
Hi. I just want to remind ourselves that Manitou is not built on a grid. And so there are many strange lots where there might be the house, hundreds of feet away from any front yard and maybe not even visible from the front, from the street, so that a detached little cottage would be maybe not even visible itself. So to have that restriction, it doesn't really speak to the uniqueness of Manitou and the topography and the situations. So I think it's still pretty restrictive, and I can't vote, but I just want to put in one more word of encouragement to be less restrictive and allow people to accommodate changing family dynamics and support the health, safety, and welfare of their families and loved ones.
Well, in that scenario, wouldn't an applicant be able to request a variance?
Yeah, variances are allowed on anything, I think. It's,
Mhm.
I don't think there's anything in the variance code that says I can't get a variance to build an ADU that's not behind the rear facade. So that's the point. Gloria,
I move to include the first limitation, prohibit ADUs in front yards by imposing front setbacks equal blah, 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 blah. So the first limitation as it is written. I move to approve that or to include that.
I'm a little confused. Can you read the motion, the
Yes,
detail, as you see it? Like you're talking about it for ADU setbacks, or detached and so on, that
Yes.
first one.
yes.
Okay.
Do you want me to try to? Okay. I move to include the following limitation: to prohibit ADUs in front yards by imposing front setbacks equal to the rearmost facade of the primary residence for detached ADUs and equal to the frontmost facade of the primary residence for attached ADUs.
Okay, is there a second?
I can second that.
Okay, any more discussion?
Could I, Alan, just
Yes.
so to clarify, that in the scenario that Megan brought up and that I was trying to articulate, you as a homeowner could not expand your house into the front yard to create an ADU, correct? With what Commissioner Latimer just proposed.
That's my sense. Yeah,
That's the way I read it also.
yeah, okay. I'm comfortable with the first part of that, but not the second part. I think whoever made this suggestion to remove the language for attached ADUs, I like. That I think if you want to expand your house and you're still meeting the setbacks, I think that should be reasonable. But if you could strike that part of it, I could probably second it.
I would accept that. So Alan, are you saying prohibit ADUs in front yards by imposing front setbacks equal to the rearmost facade of the primary residence for detached ADUs, period?
Yeah. That's good. I'll second that. Is there any more discussion on that?
Well, if you're talking about changes, I don't see why a detached one couldn't be side by side rather than behind. So as proposed, I would vote against it. That's all
Okay.
I'm saying.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, we have a motion and a second. So if there's no more discussion, let's, all those in favor of this motion, raise their hand, say aye. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 5. All those opposed? Okay, so the measure carries 5-2, or the recommendation to council. So now we can move on to the covered parking spaces issue. And we've discussed a lot. If someone would make a motion, that's fine, or we can discuss more.
I did want to mention just another option or way we could look at parking. Like when you talk about the Crystal Park example where there's a long driveway, they maybe have the opportunity for 8 parking spaces on their property. The code does speak to parking minimums for a single residential home, either in, we'll say, a Crystal Park neighborhood or a lot that maybe would be considered legal non-conforming, so like a historic lot, wherein it requires one off-street parking spot for the legal non-conforming, or 2 for the more standard lots that we have in Crystal Park. So there could be language that we looked at in terms of a carport or a garage cannot be converted if it would take them below the minimum. If they're meeting, it would take them out of compliance, versus something where, like what you're referring to, where it's like, okay, I can get rid of this, but I still have the opportunity for 6 other parking spots on my property.
Yeah, okay. I think that's, so basically the language would be something like conversions of covered parking shall be, are permitted as long as the minimum parking requirements, including the ADU, are met.
We can't require a
Oh.
parking spot for the ADU, but we could, like the primary use, which is that primary structure.
Okay, right, you're right. I forgot about that, the state law. Fred.
Can I add to that? Actually, the legislation allows allows us to require an existing parking space to be dedicated for an ADU. What it doesn't allow us to do is require that a new parking space be created for the ADU.
So that would mean that as long as we provide sufficient off-street parking for the property, covered parking spaces could be converted to ADUs. Does someone want to make that motion? No? No. Okay, Mike. I can do that. I'm going to be chair for a couple more meetings, so. Okay, I move that we propose ADUs shall be allowed. No, wait, sorry. See, I always rely on other people to make it. So let me look at this for a minute. ADUs shall not result in the loss of minimum parking for the property.
Isn't that just the code as it's written though?
You're right. Okay, so I take it, maybe I move that that the commission recommend to council that they do not implement item 2. The item that says ADU shall not result in the loss of covered parking spaces.
I'll second that one as well.
Okay, all those in favor? Are you in favor of that, Mike? Okay, so that passes unanimously.
That's to deny that that provision altogether.
Yes. Okay, so I guess we can move on to number 3, LUDC updates,
Be-
density height.
Sorry,
Very-
Alan, before we move on, just a quick question. Fred, there's multiple cities opposing these House bills. Do you have any idea how that's going?
Not recently. I probably don't know any more than the general citizen knows. The information that I received has been through the newspapers and the press and everything. And I know there's a legal challenge by a handful of communities in the Denver metro area. And that's all I know. I don't know the status of it.
Okay.
Except that litigation is pending.
I would just add in the initial legislation, the discussion was really about providing more affordable accessory dwelling units. And yet the legislation really didn't use the word affordable very often. Matter of fact, I think it's only in there once. So I hope that most of these do become affordable.
Okay, I'm up next. We have code revisions, and let me pull up. I apologize. The staff didn't provide a whole lot of information in your packet for this discussion. We provided a little bit of information that we found from other communities, what other communities are doing in terms of densities in their mixed use zoning districts and things like that. We have some more information for you tonight, and we have a better PowerPoint presentation to discuss densities in zoning districts, as well as a little bit more information on variances and the variance criteria based on what we heard from the Planning Commission last month. I can go through that, but I want to add the caveat that it's quite a bit of information, and I know we did not provide it in your packet, so you haven't had a chance to look at it. So I would encourage us to talk as much as you would like to tonight, and if we want to continue, or if we need to continue the discussion, let's continue the discussion. I want to make sure that Planning Commission has enough time to discuss these things.
Just a clarification, the outcome of this item is just discussion, or are you wanting, and we'll move?
Yeah. As a work session, the intention is for this to have discussion. If we find a general direction, that's great. If we don't, staff can go back and provide some more information based on what we discussed today or tonight. Let me share my screen. Okay. So land use development, more land use development code revisions. So based on what we had discussed, and based on Planning Commission's request last month, we did a little bit of research on looking at densities and dimensions to see what other communities were doing. So and this is provided in your packet, or was provided in your packet. We identified a couple communities, I guess what I call peer communities that are similar to Manitou in size, in its economy, and growth trends and things like that. And we came up with a handful of communities. The one that appeared to most closely match Manitou was actually Estes Park, in population, economy, and things like that. The only difference is Estes Park is not adjacent to a major metropolitan area like Manitou Springs is. So I included that information in the packet, and we can go through that right now. it's interesting because in terms of looking at what the densities are in these, I guess, mixed use or central business district type zoning districts, they're all over the map. Or what we found out is they're all over the map, and we found some where densities are less than Manitou, and some where densities are more than Manitou, frankly. So in Estes Park, we looked at their downtown commercial and accommodation zoning districts. Density was about, actually for their downtown commercial, they had a limit of 19 dwelling units per acre on the first floor. However, there is no minimum land area required for a number of units on upper floors. So that means there's no restriction on the number of units that you could have on the second, third, or fourth floor. There is a maximum building height of 42 feet. And then their accommodation zoning district, which is a little bit farther out from the commercial core, they have a restriction of about eight dwelling units per acre, with a maximum building height of 30 feet. An accommodation is kind of like a commercial strip on the outside or on the outskirts of town. If you looked at Estes Park's zoning map.
Hey, Fred, just a quick question. What are Manitou's requirements? So we have something to think about while you tell us those.
10 dwelling units per acre for general residential, 5 for LDR, and I think it's 25 for HDR, or is it 30? No, it's, yeah, the commercials are.
I think 20, is it 20 in the commercial zoning district? 20 dwelling units per?
Yeah, yes, I think it is. In the mixed use, certainly. I think the downtown may be a little higher.
Downtown is higher. The downtown zoning district is higher. It's either 30 or it might be 35. Aaron, do you happen to have that?
I don't have that open right now, but I can open it real quick.
Thank you. Good question.
It's 30 for downtown.
Yeah, 30 downtown, 20 commercial.
With a bonus of 25% if you do affordable.
Yes, that's correct. So 20 and 30, that's what we're looking at. And that 20 dwelling units per acre in the commercial zoning district, in general location, for example, the Urban Renewal Authority area, Manitou Avenue on the east side of town is zoned commercial. And so that would have a density limitation of 20 dwelling units per acre. Okay, so we're, let's see, we have Estes Park. We looked at Woodland Park, just up the road, looked at their central business district, service commercial, community commercial, neighborhood commercial. What we found is that they had no specific restriction, no specific density restriction, but they had a maximum building height of 35 feet. And actually that was about it. So not a whole lot of information from Woodland Park that we could find just on the face of the zoning code, but it did not appear that there was any specific restrictions for density. We also looked towns of Salida and Buena Vista. Salida in their mixed use, residential mixed use zoning district, it looked like that they had allowed a density of about 15 or 16 dwelling units per acre, with a maximum building height of 35 feet. Buena Vista and their commercial and high density residential zoning districts, they did not have a density limitation, but they have a maximum lot coverage of no more than 75% of their lot could be covered, with a maximum building height of 30 to 35 feet. Then we looked at Leadville, Durango, and Fountain. Leadville in their retail core, commercial, retail and residential zoning districts all had about a maximum building height of 35 feet. In their commercial zoning districts, they allowed between 40 to 60 dwelling units per acre. And then their retail residential districts, about 20 units per dwelling acre. Sorry, 20 dwelling units per acre, which is similar to our commercial zoning district. Took a look at Durango in their central business district and other business type districts. They allowed for between 24 to 42 dwelling units per acre, but depending on the district. So that was about similar to what we allow. And then Fountain, they have a residential mixed use and mixed use zoning districts. They have maximum building height of 35 to 40 feet. But their density was actually restricted to about 16 dwelling units per acre. So as I said, they're kind of all over the map. We seem to be kind of in the middle, based on what other communities our size have. We do have room to increase density or recommend increased density and not be an outlier, I guess, with other communities. So that's what we have for those particular densities and dimensions. And for variance, we can, I don't know if we want to discuss densities before we get into variances, we can certainly do that, or I can go through the whole presentation.
But
first.
what is the outcome that we want from this? Just
I think my perception is the outcome. I think it's targeted in that commercial zoning district, and is 20 dwelling units per acre the most appropriate, and that's hard to answer.
yeah, okay, because it's yeah. I guess I'm just not sure where we're going to go. We can talk, and then are we going to come up with sort of a straw man proposal, or are we going to vote on it? Do we want to just give feedback?
Yeah.
Not sure where this is going.
Well, isn't it to decide whether we're going to make recommendations to the city council about it?
That's pretty much what I'm asking.
To decide whether we will?
I think, the reason maybe this question of density came up is, does the density requirement that we have today match what we see for the comprehensive plan in terms of housing goals? Especially when we look at the commercial zone district is primarily what we're seeing in the URA. We have empty lots there. There is the potential for some of those robust types of development that maybe align with maybe not affordable housing, but having more like accessible housing. And the answer could be, yes, we're comfortable with exactly where it is, but we wanted to open it up for discussion based on, I think, some comments that we had heard.
Okay.
And if we're not ready to vote tonight, we don't have to vote
Yeah.
tonight on a recommendation. But
Okay. Okay, thanks. I think it would make sense to take the items one at a time. Like, let's, come up with our thoughts on density and then move on to variances. Is that okay? Does that make sense? Because otherwise we're going to be bouncing back and forth. So thoughts on density?
Well, I'm not totally knowledgeable about this, but I've heard that the URA would appreciate a greater density in the commercial zone. And so, maybe we could start by, what do we think about that?
Yeah. Yeah. Any thoughts? It's currently 20 with a 25% bonus if it's affordable.
I guess I'm just uncomfortable with this whole conversation. I would have preferred seeing something in advance and have, like you said, what is the goal? What are we trying to accomplish? It just seems kind of vague right now, and it's throwing out a lot of information like this without having a chance to review it in advance is not preferred.
Megan?
I seem to recall that there was direction given to staff to look into guidance to inform potential text edits on commercial density and height, because we're not getting more housing, we're not getting affordable or attainable or accessible housing, and we've just added additional restrictions to ADUs, which is one way to increase housing availability and affordability. So I appreciate the work that staff's done, and I would highly encourage consideration of increased commercial density based on this information. So thank you to the staff.
Any other thoughts?
I guess I'd add, again, I also want to thank staff. To me, when I look at this though, if this is my data I'm going off of, it doesn't appear that Manitou is too far out of norm with some of our analogous comparable cities. Perhaps Leadville's an outlier though. But I'm inclined perhaps to increase density a little bit, but again, I don't think we're out of norm here. So I could also support a viewpoint that says we're right maybe where we should be. But maybe we're all wrong. All of these cities are wrong. I don't know. To me, kind of echoing some concerns I'm hearing from other commissioners, I feel like if we get outside this data too far, we start going into an area of like setting policy. And sure, we can make recommendations to council, but I think ultimately the direction of the city is far above our pay grade here.
Megan, could you put some numbers on what you were saying?
Well, I think what we have is an affordability crisis. So to be in the middle of the pack that is almost all, except for potentially Fountain, pretty unaffordable places to live and unattainable housing. That means that we may not be meeting our comprehensive plan goals for housing and attainability there. As far as numbers, I would say let's go large, because right now we don't have a lot in that's economically viable to develop for housing in our commercial district, right? We have a vacant lot that's been vacant for years now, and it's just does not make any kind of economic sense to develop it at the current density limitations. So I don't, maybe that means 60 dwelling units per acre.
I guess my thought of if we allow 30 downtown, why not allow it commercially? That's the ballpark that I would go in.
Yeah, I guess, I see like the downtown has the height, the buildings are taller. It's a different, space. I could see a moderate increase. I think 50 would be way over what this community needs or wants. And I guess I think of the affordability crisis is it's a regional situation, and what's done in Denver or Colorado Springs is not necessarily what we do here, and the fact that we are adjacent to Colorado Springs makes it a bigger problem. And I think I like the data that was provided. It really shows that we're not that far off from similar communities. And I think we have to be careful not to destroy what we have as a brand. You know, we are this cute little community, and if we opened up the floodgates and all of a sudden had, you know, high-rise buildings all over, I think it would really diminish the quality of life here. But at the same time, I could see bumping up, you know, taking that argument about, you know, the fact it's a little higher downtown, maybe 25 with a 25% bonus. That would, you know, that would be like fairly close to what that first project that was proposed for the LaFawn property, you know, it'd be, you know, it would be like, you know, 65 or something, which is very close to what they proposed. And so that would be, I think, some movement towards that. I think any more than that, we'll get a lot of pushback. But this is my thinking.
Yeah, it seems to me having or making a decision really is premature for us because we just don't really have enough data. I don't know what the URA would recommend, what the URA board would recommend in terms of density. And I bet you do.
Yeah.
So I just think it would be, I don't have enough information to make a recommendation.
Yeah, I think the URA would want to go a lot bigger, taller, everything, but I don't necessarily think that represents the feeling of the community based on the work we've done over the last 3 years and land use update.
So their recommendation might be much higher than perhaps we would be comfortable with, or is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I would say most likely.
Most likely,
You know,
like
the
more
board
than
has
60?
changed a little bit in the last couple of years, but when we were doing the LUDC update, they were talking about sky's the limit.
Mm.
You know, why not have big, tall buildings? You know, it's a shield against the highway there. And I don't think it met the goals of the community. You know, you know, on one hand, there was that thought of let's build big and tall, and there was a shock within the community of a project that was built that sort of really overwhelmed the feeling along the avenue there. And the idea was we don't want to do more of that. And that's why we came up with the height limits we did. But and when we compromised on the density for the commercial district, it was quite a bit low. You know, it was, you know, maybe it was, you know, we could probably go back and historically look at it. It was either 30 or 25 that was suggested, and we settled on 20.
Okay, thank you.
Fred, just two questions. What is the height limitation right now? And the second, how does I guess we also have to remind ourselves of the new state rule that in regards to being in a transit district, and if it's under 20 units, there's no parking requirement. And if it's over 20 units, I think you can only require one additional or one parking space per unit, if I remember right. So that would have to be considered in this discussion too, because 50 units would be limited to 50 parking spaces, if I understand that correctly.
Yeah, the parking's a different beast than what we're talking about. We're talking about density. We don't need to muddle it with parking. That's a whole nother thing that we're doing. And I would recommend, if you haven't, read the code and get those numbers down. It's like, it's pretty basic to what we do.
Right now, the commercial zoning district has a height limit of 35 feet.
Make it,
Commissioner Day.
Could we invite a comment from both the Housing Advisory Board and the URA?
sure. We've done it before. We could do it again.
I mean, they are part of the community, so that would be important to hear their thoughts. Thanks.
Okay. And we could also go back and look at the results from the 2 years ago when we talked to them.
I think we should postpone the discussion until we have more information.
Okay, so we've got this data and we can think about it, and I'll see if I can dredge up the recommendations from the URA and the HAB from when we're doing the LEDC update, because there were some joint meetings. So now we can move on to density, I guess.
Great, thank you. It also makes sense to remind ourselves, I'll have information about what Plan Manitou currently says about housing. I think that'll be helpful too, so. Okay, more to come.
And I guess just a clarifying point. So Chair Delwich, you'll be bringing back information at the next meeting of what was discussed when the code was revised in terms of having a joint session between URA and HAB. Is that something we want to look at for December or for January, February timeframe?
I think it'd be better to wait till next year. But I can just go back and probably find those meetings pretty easily that we had.
Sounds good, thank you. Okay, on to variances. So we can begin our variance information. So this is I will preface this information I did not have in your packet, so this is new to you. Many apologies for that. We spent a lot of time on this, and it was a staff effort. And so I want to make sure, even though we're presenting this tonight, I can have this available and send it to Planning Commission for you to take as much time as you need to digest it. But what we have right here, this is basically all the variance criteria that we have from section 18.06.4.2 with the approval, the two first approval criteria with no variance shall be authorized unless the Planning Commission finds that this has been met. And then there is 6 other criteria that variance requests must meet a minimum of 4 of those criteria in order to be approved. I'm sure you all are very familiar with this. So what we did is we kind of split that up, and based on what we heard from the Planning Commission last month, as well as our own observations of the code and everything, I identified each of those criteria, and we're proposing what to do with them. There were a number of criteria that we heard we need to review and refine and possibly provide better definition, better parameters for them. That's what we see on the left-hand side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are 5 criteria that I think could use some refining or defining, and help defining some particular terms that would help review variances a little bit better. We did find that there are at least 2 criteria that appear to be regulated elsewhere in the code, and we wanted to identify those and talk about those where we think they're regulated elsewhere in the code and may not be necessary. And also maybe a possible new section regarding the disability, the disability criteria, and I'll get into that once we get that's at the end of this particular presentation, and have some ideas on what to do with that. So we'll go through each of those criteria. The first one regarding natural hazard areas that not result in development of areas at risk of natural hazards unless adequate mitigation is provided. One thing that we wanted to note is that that this is already required in the code, and we're referring to that natural hazard section that is applicable to all development. And so what we're wondering is that perhaps this criteria may not be necessary specifically in variances, because any project that requires a variance is going to be required to comply with the natural hazard standards anyway, even if the variance criteria did not exist. And so whether a variance is proposed or not, that natural hazards criteria must be met, unless somebody is actually requesting a variance from one of the natural hazards criteria. And so we're wondering, we wanted to throw out that perhaps this isn't necessary to be a criteria in the variance section. On with the second criteria regarding adverse impacts. No adverse impact will result on adjacent properties, and we thought that this one needed some review, some refining, and what we heard, perhaps some better definition, maybe a better definition of what adverse impact is. Adverse impacts and adjacent are not necessarily defined in the code. Usually when we're talking about adverse impacts, we're talking about noise, dust, glare, odor, vibration, traffic. I also added solar access, thinking that if there's a height variance or something like that, this is what some variances, you see some variance requests in very dense cities where they are wanting to exceed a height restriction, and it creates a shadow onto the neighbor and reduces solar access. Sometimes a lot of times that's not desirable. I also point that out because you see that in state legislation wanting to emphasize the importance of solar access for potential solar energy generation and things like that. So we wanted to throw out some questions like for the Planning Commission to consider, like how are these measured and enforced in Manitou? Does an impact or does an adverse impact create a detriment to the adjacent property? Okay, so what's a detriment? So I just looked at the definition of detriment. The detriment is the state of being harmed or damaged, a cause of injury or damage. So is there a damage that's being created due to a particular variance request? And then definition of impact, looked that up in the dictionary, and that definition is to have a direct effect or impact on or impinge on. One of the things that I've noticed in processing variances from my perspective is that, you get to know, or you learn more about whether an adverse impact is occurring based on public comment. And if neighbors show up to comment on the particular variance, are they in favor of it or are they not in favor of it? And if they're not in favor of it, why is that? And a lot of times you can discern whether there's an adverse impact from public comment who would be directly impacted by that particular request. But that's something where we thought some more definition could be provided under what is that adverse impact? Let's see, then we move on to the first criteria in that set of 6 regarding unique hardship, that the applicant would the applicant suffer unnecessary hardship as a result of the application of the code, which hardship is not generally applicable to other lands or structures in the same zone district because of the unusual configuration of the applicant's property boundaries, so on and so forth. One of the questions that this code, well, number one, what we heard is that we probably need to refine or define what hardship is or provide more explanation for that. One question that we had was that we wanted to throw out is, would the property have, and I think this is kind of a typical question, would the property have any beneficial use without the variance? If the code is so restrictive that it's keeping any beneficial use from occurring on the property, that's kind of the purpose of a variance. Think of a variance as a relief valve or a release to provide some relief to a property that is so hindered because of its configuration or topography that that it wouldn't have any beneficial use without the particular variance. So that's where we see maybe there's some better defining of what a hardship is regarding that, or some better explanation. Let's see. So on to the next one, no alternatives. The next one regarding it indicates are there design alternatives or there are no design alternatives or alternative locations for structures that would eliminate the need for the requested variance, or would would reduce the amount of the variance required. So what we were asking ourselves is, what does reasonable use mean? Sorry, let me add on. The last sentence is, the variance is the minimum variance that would make possible the reasonable use of the land or the structure. So what is reasonable use? What's reasonable? Maybe further defining this or further clarifying this would mean reasonable use is perhaps what related to the standards that would be required or permitted by the current code. And we had an example here that you have a off-street parking space is required for a new house or for a new residence. Therefore, a variance to permit an off-street parking space could be considered reasonable. Could be considered reasonable of the property in order for the property to be able to comply with the code. And maybe you tie reasonable use to the ability for a development to be able to comply with the code. Excuse me. Rights enjoyed by others. So the third criteria in that set of 6 is indicates the enforcement of the provisions of the code deprives the applicant of rights enjoyed by a majority of other properties in the same zoning district. And we kind of see this as similar to the previous slide. And what if we focus on the provisions or the requirements of the zone district, not necessarily how those are implemented on each lot, since many lots are legal non-conforming. But if we're saying that if the criteria is that the enforcement of the provisions of the code deprives the applicants the rights enjoyed by a majority of the other properties in the same zoning district, that what is the provision or what is the regulation that's being adversely affected, or that somebody cannot comply with and that they need a variance for. An example of this, again, off-street parking is mandated by the zone district, but neighbors don't have it because none of the lots have space that complies with modern dimensional standards. So they would need a variance to vary from those particular dimensional standards. Let's see, and then the self-imposed hardship. This is interesting. What this says is the need for the variance is not the result from actions of previous property owners or an otherwise self-imposed hardship. We didn't have a whole lot to comment on this. We see this a lot in other, or I see this a lot in other codes, but generally we haven't seen it be typical that that a self-imposed hardship to include previous property owners. Just my professional experience has been asking the question whether the hardship is self-imposed by the particular person who's requesting the variance. A lot of times people, when they're trying to improve their property or make improvements or enhance it in some way, they're trying to fix a problem that happened years ago, or by a previous property owner. And because of the action or because of the thing that happened years ago by a previous property owner, there's no way to fix it without a variance. In cases like that, sometimes it may be appropriate to grant a variance in order to get the property owner, get the applicant able to move on with making the improvements that they want to make. But that's a comment that we wanted to throw out, that typically self-imposed hardship criteria does not include actions by previous property owners.
Fred, at some point, I want to comment on this particular.
I would suggest tonight we hear the information. Since this is new information, I'm not going to be prepared to even discuss it until
Okay,
we
I'm
have
happy
time
discuss it
to really
another time.
digest this. Should have been in the packet, or we should at least have time to contemplate.
Okay.
And then the next one regarding disabilities. One of the questions maybe to throw out for Planning Commission to think about is, should the city approve or deny reasonable accommodations relating to ADA or relating to disability in a public hearing or a variance type situation? And what if there's an opportunity to identify this or consider this in a new administrative or in a new adjustment section for these allowances? As a parallel, this exists in the code when we're looking at architectural features under section 18.02.1.4 CI, where architectural features such as parapets and pipes and chimneys and things like that, or other similar projections, may extend up to 5 feet above the maximum permitted building height in the associated zone district. Provisions like this allow for some variance or some provision of a variance at the staff level or at the site plan level that maybe you could craft a new section to address ADA issues or disability type issues. I don't have it here in this particular presentation, but my understanding is, for example, the city of Pueblo does that for accessibility issues. They allow administrative variances to allow for accessibility into a building for ADA purposes. So that is, oh yeah, then that's right. Then we have one more. Sorry, the historic resource. The last provision regarding variance requests is required in order to preserve a contributing structure in a historic subdistrict. We think that this actually already exists in the historic district. And we wanted to point out that in Title 17, subject to the historic district guidelines, a permanent side setback of less than 7.5 feet may be reviewed, i.e. a variance may be reviewed and approved or conditionally approved or denied by the Historic Preservation Commission. It indicates that at no time without variance approval shall the side setback be less than 5 feet or less than a 10 feet separation from neighboring buildings and structures. So we thought that this should be explored and that perhaps that this criteria is already addressed in Title 17. Let's see, that is the end. So what I can do is I'm very happy to put all of this information in a quick memo and provide this PowerPoint to everybody so you can take a look at it, digest it some more. If anybody has any questions or would like some more information, I'm happy to provide that. But I do apologize that this wasn't in the packet. We spent a lot of time putting this together, and I regret that it wasn't we didn't get it done by the time the packet went out. Does anybody have any questions?
No, it's going to take some time to digest, I think. Anybody else? Okay. Yeah, I think that would be good. And we can get that sort of mid-month before the next meeting, just sort of to have some time.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's great. So anything else?
No, that's all that I have.
So shall we move on to other business?
Yeah, I don't think we have any other business, but we can go on to notice of council action.
Sure.
Just wanted to say the Hiawatha Gardens entitlements were all approved by City Council last month. All of the entitlements, the rezoning, subdivision, the road vacation, the major development plan. I might be missing. Is that it? Were approved by City Council, and that project, the Hiawatha Gardens project, now has all the entitlements to move forward with obtaining building permits and move on with construction.
Great. And I just have to do a shout out to Erin. She just such an amazing job on this project for the last 2 years. It's unbelievable how much work and how she got her arms around a very complicated thing. So I just have one more thing that, we've sort of in the past not really followed one little snippet in the code. And since the clerk was here tonight, when someone's up to be reappointed, the wording says, well, is the commission okay with it? And so Justin's up, he's requested to be reappointed. I'd say we'd be crazy not to, but if anybody has any bad stuff to say about Justin, this is your opportunity. Okay. Okay, so we followed the procedure this time. So with that, let's adjourn.